Let's talk about the Gospel of John. I mean, this is a book that has profoundly shaped history, philosophy, and faith for literally 2,000 years. But here's the thing, it wasn't just written down as a simple biography. Nope. It was crafted with a very specific, multi-layered purpose. To really get it, we have to look past the surface and ask a crucial question.
And that brings us to the heart of the matter. We all know this book is a heavyweight, one of the most influential ever written. But what was its actual goal? What did the author want his readers to do or think or believe after they read that final word?
Well, to figure that out, we first need to see how the book is built. It's not just a random collection of stories. It has a super clear four-part structure. First, you've got the prologue, which sets this huge cosmic stage. Then comes the Book of Signs, which is all about public miracles. After that, it shifts to the Book of Glory, focusing on private teaching. And it all wraps up with an epilogue. Trust me, this structure is the key to unlocking the whole thing.
And that structure leads us right to the first and, honestly, the most important layer. Its main goal was evangelism. More than anything else you could say about it, this book is a powerful, direct call to believe.
You know, what's really amazing here is that we don't even have to speculate. The author, John, comes right out and tells us his primary purpose. He just lays all his cards on the table, making his #1 goal totally, completely crystal clear.
And here it is. This is basically the thesis statement for the entire gospel, right from chapter 20. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. It's all right there, isn't it? The signs are written down to lead you to belief, and that belief is the doorway to life.
And just to really hammer this point home, check out this number. The word believe, or something like it, shows up about 98 times in this one gospel. 98! Come on, that's no accident. That's a relentless, laser-like focus. Every story, every miracle is pulling the reader toward this one single point of belief.
And this is where the structure brilliantly serves that goal. The first half, the Book of Signs, that's for everyone. The miracles are done out in the open, before them, aimed at the whole world and any skeptical onlookers. But then in the second half, the Book of Glory, it's like Jesus closes the door. It becomes this private, intimate teaching session for the insiders, for his disciples. It's a huge shift from a public call to private teaching.
So what happens after someone believes? Is that it? Not at all. And that brings us to the second layer of the book's purpose, edification, or, building up the insiders.
Edification. It's a bit of a formal word, right? But all it really means is to instruct or improve someone, to build them up in their faith. Once the author has convinced you to believe, his goal kind of shifts. Now he wants to equip you, to get you ready for everything that comes next.
And man, chapters 13 through 17, what people call the farewell discourse, this section is just packed with content for believers. Jesus talks about needing daily forgiveness. He promises the Holy Spirit is coming to be their guide. He gives them a heads up about future persecution, and then he prays this incredible prayer for their protection and unity. This stuff isn't for outsiders. It's basically a survival guide for the faithful.
Okay, but there's a third layer, and this one is a lot more subtle. It's woven throughout the entire story. It's a quiet defense of the faith, this little undertone of evidence that we can call apologetics.
Let's look at our first case study here, a guy named Nathan L. Jesus calls him an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. He's basically set up as the perfect example of someone who is open-minded and genuine, a huge contrast to the religious leaders who are just dripping with suspicion. So when Jesus reveals this little piece of supernatural knowledge, that he saw Nathanael under a fig tree, Nathanael doesn't argue, he doesn't doubt. He immediately blurts out, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." His quick, unblocked belief is the model for how John wants his readers to respond when they're presented with the evidence.
All right, next up, Nicodemus. He's a high-ranking Pharisee, and he's totally fascinating because his story tracks this gradual journey. He goes from being a secret seeker to a public supporter, and his journey serves as this quiet rebuke to all his skeptical buddies.
You can actually watch him evolve right across the gospel. In chapter 3, he's sneaking over to see Jesus at night under the cover of darkness. Fast forward to chapter 7, and he's actually speaking up in public, defending Jesus' right to a fair trial. And then, by chapter 19, he throws all that caution to the wind and publicly identifies with Jesus by helping care for his crucified body. It's a really powerful character arc that kind of judges the other leaders who just refuse to move.
And finally, we get to the man born blind. Oh man, this guy is the absolute peak of John's apologetic theme. He's uneducated, he's an outcast, but he uses simple logic and his own experience to tie the religious experts into complete knots. It's amazing.
His defense is just brilliant. And he even gets sarcastic. After they keep grilling him over and over, he just says, "Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" That question, coming from a beggar who used to be blind, becomes this sharp, ironic takedown of their stubborn unbelief. The point is, his simple testimony is a way more powerful defense than all of their complicated theology.
So let's put it all together. The Gospel of John has this incredible three-layered purpose. First, you have evangelism, aimed right at unbelievers, and you see that perfectly in the purpose statement itself. Second, there's edification, for believers and disciples, which is the whole point of the farewell discourse. And third, you've got this subtle undertone of apologetics, for the skeptics, which is just perfectly captured in the story of the man born blind.
These three goals, evangelism, edification, and apologetics, they all work together to create this incredibly persuasive and powerful document, which really leaves us with a final thought. How does knowing about this intentional, three-layered design change the way you might read this ancient text? Because it's no longer just a collection of stories, is it? It becomes a carefully constructed argument, inviting you to see, to believe, and to understand.